The lawyer adjusted his glasses and rested one hand on the thick leather folder in front of him. No one spoke. The room, filled with polished mahogany furniture and portraits of my uncle's achievements, suddenly felt smaller. My mother leaned back confidently, crossing her legs. "I told you," she whispered to my sister Melissa, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Robert always knew blood comes first." Melissa smirked. She was wearing a black designer dress that still had the boutique tag tucked beneath the sleeve. Even today, she couldn't resist showing off. Across the room, I sat quietly beside my husband Ethan. Neither of us had touched the bottled water placed before us. I wasn't thinking about money. I wasn't even thinking about the will. I was still trying to accept that Uncle Robert was gone. For 15 years, he had been the only person who ever chose me. The lawyer finally cleared his throat. "Before we begin distributing the estate, Mr. Robert Harrison requested that I read a personal statement." Mother sighed dramatically. "Oh, honestly, Robert always loved making speeches." A few relatives laughed politely. The lawyer ignored them. He unfolded a handwritten letter. "I am fully aware that several people sitting in this room believe they already know what this document contains." Mother smiled wider. "But if you're hearing these words, it means I'm no longer here to explain my decision myself." Silence. The lawyer continued. "I've spent my entire life building businesses. I learned very early that character predicts destiny far better than blood." Mother's smile faded. Just a little. Melissa exchanged a glance with her husband. The lawyer kept reading. "Some of you abandoned people who needed you. Others opened your homes to strangers. I never forgot the difference." A strange feeling settled over the room. People shifted uneasily. Mother folded her arms. "What exactly is he talking about?" She muttered. I already knew, because every sentence carried me back. Back to a rainy October afternoon. Back to being 13 years old. Back to the day my parents decided I wasn't worth keeping. I still remember the sound of the suitcase zipper. It was broken. It always caught halfway. I sat on my bedroom floor, pushing it closed with both hands while tears blurred everything in front of me. Downstairs, my parents were arguing, not about whether I should leave. That decision had already been made. They were arguing about who would drive me to the bus station. "I have patience." Father's voice. "I have errands." Mother answered. Neither one wanted to spend 20 minutes getting rid of their own daughter. Melissa stood in my doorway. She was only 16, but already knew she was untouchable. She folded her arms. "You should have apologized." I looked up. "For what?" "For embarrassing Dad." I told the truth. Her eyes rolled. "No, you ruined dinner."
Melissa cried, and somehow I became the villain. Now they wanted me gone. Mother finally climbed the stairs. She didn't knock. She never did. "Are you finished?" I nodded. She looked around my tiny bedroom. The posters, the secondhand bookshelf, the science trophies she never once congratulated me for earning. She pointed toward the suitcase. "Take everything." I frowned. "Everything. I don't want reminders." The words hit harder than any slap ever could. Not reminders. Not memories. Reminders. Like I was an old piece of furniture. I picked up my backpack. Inside were 3 notebooks, 2 shirts, a flashlight, and the only photograph I'd secretly kept of Uncle Robert and me fishing when I was 8. Mother noticed it immediately. "You still have that." She reached for the picture. I stepped backward. "It's mine." "No." She held out her hand. "Everything in this house belongs to us. I stared at her. For several long seconds, neither of us moved. Then, a voice echoed from downstairs. "Hurry up, Father!" Mother glared at me one last time before turning away. "Fine, but don't ever come back asking for help." Those words stayed with me for 15 years. Not because they hurt, because they became a promise. Father didn't drive me to the bus station. He drove me to the edge of town. There was an old gas station beside the highway where buses stopped twice a day. Rain hammered against the windshield as he pulled into the empty parking lot. Neither of us spoke. The engine idled. Finally, he unlocked the passenger door. "Get out." I looked at him. "You're not even taking me to the station." "This is close enough." I swallowed hard. "I don't have anywhere to go." "You'll figure it out." Those 4 words told me everything I needed to know. I climbed out with my suitcase. The rain soaked through my hoodie in seconds. Father rolled down his window. "For your own good," he said. "You need to learn responsibility." Then he drove away. Not once did he look back. I watched the taillights disappear into the storm. That was the last time I saw either of my parents for 15 years. I sat on the cold metal bench for almost an hour. The station was nearly empty. An elderly couple sat at the far end. A truck driver drank coffee from a paper cup. Everyone looked busy with their own lives. No one noticed the 13-year-old girl trying not to cry. I checked my backpack. $32. That was everything I owned. No phone, no place to sleep, no relatives willing to take me. Or at least, that's what my parents had told me. They'd always said our family hated each other, that no one wanted anything to do with us. I believed them. Until my backpack buzzed. No, not a phone. An old pager, one I'd completely forgotten was inside. It belonged to Uncle Robert. Months earlier, he'd given it to me while cleaning out his office. "If you ever need me," he'd said with a smile, "send this number a message from any payphone." At 13, I'd laughed. Who still used pagers? Apparently, my uncle did. I stared at the small device. Could I really call him? Would he even answer? Would he believe me? I walked toward the payphone near the vending machines. My hands shook so badly, I dropped the coins twice. Finally, the call connected. 1 ring, 2, 3. Then, Robert Harrison. His calm voice instantly made my throat tighten. Uncle Robert. Silence. Then his voice changed completely. "Emma?" I couldn't stop crying. He didn't interrupt. He simply waited. When I finally managed to speak, the words came out broken. "Dad, they told me to leave." Another silence. Longer this time. Then one quiet question. "Where are you?" I looked around. The old highway gas station near Millbrook. "I'll be there." "I don't want to bother." "You're never a bother." The line went dead. Exactly 23 minutes later, a dark blue Bentley rolled into the parking lot. Even through the rain, it looked impossibly expensive. The driver's door opened. Uncle Robert stepped out wearing jeans, work boots, and an old brown jacket. Not a suit, not a billionaire, just my uncle. He crossed the parking lot without saying a word. Then he wrapped both arms around me. No questions, no lectures, no disappointment. Just the first real hug I'd received in years. After almost a minute, he stepped back. His eyes scanned my soaked clothes, my suitcase, my backpack. "Did they hit you?" I shook my head. "No." "Did they feed you today?" Another shake. His jaw tightened. "Have you eaten anything?" "Yes, had cereal. Yesterday." His face went completely still. It was the quietest I'd ever seen him. Sometimes silence says more than shouting ever could. He picked up my broken suitcase himself, opened the passenger door, and smiled gently. "Come home." I hesitated. "What if they get angry?" He looked at me with confusion. "They already abandoned you." He closed the trunk. "The only thing they get now is to watch you succeed." At 13 years old, I didn't understand those words. 15 years later, I realized they were the first sentence that completely changed my life. The drive to Uncle Robert's house took almost an hour. Neither of us said much. The rain tapped softly against the windshield, while warm air from the heater slowly dried my clothes. Every few minutes, Uncle Robert glanced at me, not because he expected me to explain, because he wanted to make sure I was okay. That simple difference meant everything. For the first time in years, someone cared more about my feelings than my usefulness. When we finally pulled through a set of iron gates, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. His estate wasn't just large.
It looked like something from a movie. Rolling green hills, a long stone driveway, gardens stretching in every direction, a lake reflecting the moonlight, and at the center, a beautiful brick mansion glowing warmly through dozens of windows. I froze. You live here?" He chuckled. "I suppose I do." I looked down at my muddy sneakers. "I don't belong here." He parked the car and turned off the engine. Then he looked directly at me. "Emma?" I met his eyes. "A house isn't what people deserve. It's simply where they sleep. What matters is whether they're welcomed inside." He smiled. "And you'll always be welcome here." Something inside me broke, not from sadness, from relief. Inside, the house smelled like fresh bread and cinnamon. An older woman hurried from the kitchen. She wore an apron dusted with flour. The moment she saw me, she frowned. "Robert," she whispered. "What happened?" "This," he replied quietly, "is Emma." The woman's eyes softened instantly. "Oh, sweetheart." She wrapped me in another warm hug before I could react. "I'm Margaret. I've been trying to convince this stubborn man to hire another cook for years." Uncle Robert laughed. "I like your cooking too much." Margaret smiled at me. "Let's get you something to eat." Within 15 minutes, I was sitting at a massive oak table. Chicken soup, fresh bread, warm tea. No one asked uncomfortable questions. No one demanded explanations. They simply let me eat. Halfway through my second bowl, Margaret quietly placed another slice of bread on my plate. She must have noticed how quickly I was eating. She didn't say a word. She just smiled. Years later, I would realize that true kindness often arrives without announcing itself. That night, I couldn't sleep. The guest bedroom was bigger than my old bedroom back home. Soft blankets, fresh sheets, a bookshelf, a desk, even a small lamp beside the bed. It didn't feel real. Around midnight, there was a soft knock. "Come in." Uncle Robert stepped inside carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "I figured you might still be awake." He handed me one before sitting in the chair across from the bed. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked the question that had been haunting me. "Can I stay?" He looked genuinely confused. "I already answered that. I mean, for good." He leaned back. "I spoke with my attorney while you were showering." My stomach tightened. "The paperwork starts tomorrow." I blinked. "What paperwork?" "Emergency guardianship." I stared at him. "You'd really take me in?" He smiled gently. "I've wanted to for years." "What?" He nodded. "I offered more than once. My brother refused every time. He always said he didn't need charity. I felt another piece of my childhood crumble. They never told me." "I know." Silence settled between us again. Then he said something I would never forget. "Emma, listen carefully. What happened today, it wasn't because you weren't enough. It happened because they couldn't see your worth. Never confuse someone else's blindness, but for your value." I repeated those words in my head so many times over the next 15 years that they became part of who I was. The next morning, at exactly 8 a.m., Uncle Robert walked into the breakfast room wearing a navy sweater, instead of a business suit. He slid a notebook across the table toward me. "What's this?" "Rule number 1. I opened it. The first page contained only 7 handwritten words. "Nobody owes you success. Earn it anyway." I looked up. "You aren't giving me everything?" He smiled. "Oh, absolutely not." I frowned. I thought rich uncles spoiled their nieces. He laughed so hard he nearly spilled his coffee. "If I spoil you, I'll steal your future." He leaned forward. "I'll give you opportunities. I'll give you education. I'll give you safety. But you'll build your own life. Deal?" For the first time in a very long time, I smiled without forcing it. Deal. I had no idea then that those 7 words in a simple notebook would eventually help me build a company worth hundreds of millions. Nor did I know that one day, the very people who threw me away would sit in stunned silence while those same lessons determined Uncle Robert's final decision. The notebook became my most valuable possession. Not because it was expensive. It wasn't. Just a plain black leather journal with cream-colored pages. But every Monday morning, Uncle Robert wrote one new lesson inside it. Sometimes it was only a single sentence, sometimes an entire page. Each one became another brick in the foundation of the person I would eventually become. The first lesson read, "Nobody owes you success. Earn it anyway." The second, "Never mistake comfort for happiness." The third, "People reveal themselves when money enters the room." At 13, I didn't fully understand any of them. 15 years later, I understood every word. Life at the estate quickly settled into a routine. Not the kind where servants waited on me, quite the opposite. Every Saturday morning, Uncle Robert woke me up at 7. Boots. That was all he'd say. I'd stumble downstairs, still half asleep. Outside, he'd already be working. Sometimes repairing fences, sometimes planting trees, sometimes cleaning the horse barn. The estate employed dozens of people, yet he insisted on doing many jobs himself. One cold morning, I finally asked why. "You could hire someone." He smiled without looking up from the shovel. "I already have." I looked around. "I don't see anyone." He pointed the shovel toward me. "I hired you." I groaned dramatically. I knew there was a catch. He laughed. "There always is." One afternoon, after hours of pulling weeds from the garden, I couldn't hold my frustration anymore. "This doesn't make sense." "What doesn't?" "You own companies. You're rich. You don't need to do any of this." He leaned against the rake. "Emma, what do wealthy people lose first?" "I don't know." "Perspective." He handed me the rake. "If you stop respecting work, you eventually stop respecting people." That sentence stayed with me long after the dirt washed off my hands. School was another challenge. Uncle Robert enrolled me in the best public school in the county, not a private academy. When I asked why, he smiled. "Because the real world won't be full of people exactly like you." On my first day, I was terrified. New school, new town, new life. During lunch, I sat alone at the corner of the cafeteria. Old habits die hard. Then someone placed a tray beside mine. "You look lonely." I looked up. A girl with curly brown hair smiled at me. "I'm Hannah." "I'm Emma." She pointed toward my untouched sandwich. "Planning to eat that?" I laughed for the first time in weeks. We became best friends before lunch ended. That night, Uncle Robert listened while I told him everything. He never interrupted. When I finished, he simply nodded. "See?" "What?" "The world keeps introducing you to people. Never assume one bad family means a bad life." Months turned into years. Slowly, the frightened 13-year-old disappeared. I grew taller, more confident. I stopped apologizing every time I spoke. I started raising my hand in class, joining science competitions, reading business books from Uncle Robert's library. One evening, when I was 16, I walked into his study carrying a small trophy. I won. He looked up from his paperwork. "The regional engineering competition?" I nodded excitedly. "They picked my design." For a second, he simply stared at the trophy. Then he stood, walked around his desk, and hugged me. "I'm proud of you." 4 simple words. I'd waited my entire childhood to hear them from my parents. Instead, they came from the man who had chosen to become my family. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I noticed another page had been added to the notebook. It read, "The people who truly love you celebrate your victories instead of competing with them." I closed the notebook slowly. For the first time, I realized something. Maybe being disowned hadn't been the end of my life. Maybe it had been the beginning of it. Little did I know, 15 years later, those lessons and that notebook would become the most important evidence in a room where everyone expected Uncle Robert's fortune to go to someone else. By the time I turned 18, Uncle Robert had stopped treating me like a child. Not because he loved me less, because he respected me more. One Saturday morning, he tossed a set of keys onto the breakfast table. "They're not for a car," he said before I could ask. "They're for Building 3. I frowned. "The warehouse?" He nodded. "I bought it 20 years ago. What do you want me to do with it?" He smiled. "Figure that out." The warehouse was enormous. Nearly 60,000 square feet. Most of it sat empty. Old shelves, unused offices, dust everywhere. I spent 2 weeks walking through it with a notebook, sketching ideas. Every afternoon, Uncle Robert would ask the same question. What did you learn today? Never, what did you accomplish? Only, what did you learn? Eventually, I had an idea. The town had dozens of small businesses struggling to afford office space. What if the warehouse became a shared business center, affordable offices, conference rooms, shipping facilities, accounting services, everything under one roof? I nervously presented the idea to Uncle Robert. When I finished, he didn't clap. He didn't praise me. Instead, he asked one question. How much will it cost? I blinked. I don't know. Then you don't have a business. He slid a calculator across the table. Start over. For the next 3 months, I learned more than I had in years of school. Budgets, taxes, permits, insurance, payroll, marketing. Every mistake became another lesson. Sometimes I'd get frustrated. Sometimes I'd slam the notebook shut. I can't do this. Uncle Robert would always smile. Good. I stared at him. Good? If it feels impossible, you're finally learning something worthwhile. On my 19th birthday, the business center officially opened. Only 6 tenants signed leases that first month. I was disappointed. I thought we'd fill the building. Uncle Robert laughed. Every oak tree starts as an acorn. By the end of the year, there were 42 businesses operating inside. By the 3rd year, there was a waiting list. The profits weren't enormous, but they were mine. Every dollar had been earned. Not inherited, earned. One evening, while reviewing monthly reports together, Uncle Robert suddenly asked, Do you ever think about them? I knew exactly who he meant. My parents? He nodded. I stared out the study window. The sun was setting over the lake. Sometimes. Do you hate them? The question caught me off guard. I thought about it for a long time. Finally, I shook my head. No. What do you feel? I surprised myself with the answer. Nothing. He smiled softly. That's healthier. I thought forgiveness was healthier. It can be. He leaned back in his chair. But indifference means they've stopped controlling your heart. Over the next several years, my world grew larger. I lowered my head. He continued. When I'm gone, don't spend your life looking backward. Keep building. Keep helping people. And never let money become the reason someone enters your life. I swallowed hard. I promise. He smiled. Good. Then he added quietly, because after I'm gone, people you haven't heard from in years will suddenly remember their family. His words confused me. What do you mean? You'll see. 3 weeks later, I found out exactly what he meant. Margaret knocked softly on my office door. "Emma, you should come downstairs." There were voices echoing through the foyer. Familiar voices. Voices I hadn't heard in nearly 15 years. As I reached the bottom of the staircase, I froze. My mother stood beside the fireplace wearing expensive jewelry and fake concern. Father was examining the paintings on the wall as though he already owned them. Melissa sat comfortably on the sofa, scrolling through her phone. No one looked uncomfortable. No one looked guilty. It was as if they'd been visiting every Sunday. Mother spotted me first. For just a fraction of a second, shock flashed across her face. Then it disappeared behind a perfectly rehearsed smile. "Emma?" She opened her arms. "My goodness. It's been so long." I didn't move. Neither did she. The silence stretched. Finally, she lowered her arms awkwardly. Father cleared his throat. "We heard Robert wasn't well." I nodded once. "Yes." Mother placed a hand dramatically over her heart. "It's just heartbreaking." We came as soon as we heard. Something about her voice felt rehearsed, almost practiced. Then I noticed it. Melissa wasn't looking toward Uncle Robert's study. She wasn't asking about his health. She wasn't crying. She was staring at the antique grandfather clock. I knew that look. She wasn't admiring it. She was calculating its value. At that exact moment, a terrible realization settled over me. They hadn't come because Uncle Robert was dying. They had come because they believed he was worth inheriting. And somehow, I knew this visit was only the beginning. Mother's performance began immediately. She rushed toward Uncle Robert's study with tears already forming in her eyes. "Oh, Robert." Her voice cracked just enough to sound convincing. "We've been so worried about you." I watched from the hallway. Uncle Robert looked up from the book in his lap. For several long seconds, he simply stared at her. Not with anger, not even disappointment, just recognition, like someone looking at a stranger they used to know. "Hello, Claire." He closed the book. "I didn't expect to see you." Mother pressed a hand dramatically against her chest. "How could we stay away after hearing you're sick?" Father stepped beside her. "We're family." Those two words echoed through the room. Family, the same people who had thrown a 13-year-old girl onto the street were now using that word like it had never left their vocabulary. Uncle Robert remained silent. Finally, he smiled politely. "Please, have a seat." For the next hour, they talked. Or rather, Mother talked. She reminisced about childhood Christmases, family vacations, funny stories from decades ago. She laughed louder than necessary, touched Uncle Robert's shoulder every few minutes, repeated the phrase, "We're always here for you." I almost laughed. 15 years. Not one birthday card. Not one phone call. Not one visit. Now suddenly, they were inseparable. That evening, after they finally left, Margaret quietly closed the front door. She turned toward Uncle Robert. "They'll be back." He nodded. "I know." I frowned. "You knew they'd come?" He looked at me kindly. "Money has an interesting way of bringing people home." He was right. The next day, flowers arrived. Huge arrangements, expensive orchids, white lilies, handwritten cards. "Thinking of you, praying for your recovery. Love. Claire, Dennis, and Melissa." Margaret read the card aloud before setting it in the trash. "Should I save it?" Uncle Robert smiled. "The flowers can stay. The card has already served its purpose. Within 2 weeks." Their visits became routine. Every Tuesday, every Friday, every Sunday afternoon, Mother baked pies. Father brought expensive wine. Melissa constantly asked questions. "So, how's the investment company doing? Were you still involved in those overseas properties? Did you ever sell the Aspen house?" She tried to sound casual. She wasn't. She was taking inventory. One afternoon, I walked into the library just as she was photographing the paintings on the wall. She quickly lowered her phone. "I just love the artwork." I smiled politely. "So do the auction houses." Her face turned pale. Father wasn't much better. He suddenly became fascinated with Uncle Robert's finances. "Healthcare costs must be enormous. I hope insurance covers everything. You've updated your legal paperwork recently, right?" Every question sounded innocent. Every question pointed toward one thing. The will. One evening after everyone left, I found Uncle Robert sitting alone on the back porch. The sunset painted the lake in shades of orange and gold. He motioned for me to sit beside him. They're exhausting. I couldn't help smiling. I was trying not to say it. He chuckled. I appreciate the effort. For a while we watched the water in silence. Then he asked, do they ever apologize? I looked down. No. They pretend the past never happened. He nodded slowly. People who refuse to acknowledge yesterday rarely deserve tomorrow. I knew he wasn't just talking about my parents anymore. A month later, his condition worsened. The treatment stopped working. Hospital visits became longer. The doctors spoke more softly. Even the nurses wore expressions that said what no one wanted to hear. One afternoon, after another appointment, Uncle Robert asked me to stop by his attorney's office. I need to sign a few documents. I didn't ask what they were. Inside the conference room, the attorney spread several folders across the table. Uncle Robert signed each one carefully. Occasionally, he asked for another page, another witness, another signature. The attorney looked at me. Emma, would you mind waiting outside for a few minutes? I nodded. As I stood, Uncle Robert gently touched my arm. You'll understand soon enough. Those words lingered in my mind all the way home. I had no idea those papers would soon ignite a storm that would tear apart every lie my parents had built over the last 15 years. Winter arrived quietly. The first snow covered the gardens Uncle Robert loved so much. From his bedroom window, he watched the grounds disappear beneath a blanket of white. They always look peaceful after the first snowfall, he said softly. I pulled another blanket over his legs. They're waiting for spring. He smiled. So are we. But both of us knew the truth. For him, there wouldn't be another spring. The doctors stopped talking about treatment. They started talking about comfort. The word itself felt cruel. Comfort meant there was nothing left to fight. Hospice nurses began visiting every morning. Margaret filled the house with the smell of fresh bread, even though Uncle Robert could barely eat. Ethan came by almost every evening after work, helping with paperwork and quietly fixing anything around the estate that needed attention. No one complained. No one asked for recognition. We simply loved him the best way we knew how. My parents, however, became even more attentive. Mother suddenly insisted on reading to him every afternoon. She chose books she'd never opened before. Half the time she stumbled over the words. Uncle Robert listened politely. Father began bringing financial magazines. You should keep your mind active, he would say. Melissa started asking if there was anything she could organize. She spent suspiciously long periods inside Uncle Robert's office. One afternoon, I found her standing beside his filing cabinet. She smiled nervously. I was just looking for family photos. The cabinet contained tax records, not photographs. A week later, I overheard something I wasn't supposed to hear. I had gone downstairs for tea. Voices drifted from the library. Mother's, father's, Melissa's. The door wasn't completely closed. He has to leave most of it to us, Mother whispered. He doesn't have children. Father answered quietly. Emma could complicate things. Melissa laughed. She's not even his real daughter. Mother's voice became colder. Blood wins. Those 3 words made my stomach turn. Blood wins. Apparently, they still believed that. I quietly walked away before they noticed me. I didn't tell Uncle Robert. He already had enough pain. He didn't need theirs, too. 2 nights later, Uncle Robert asked me to bring him the black leather notebook. The one he'd been writing in since the day I arrived. I placed it gently on the bed. He flipped through the pages slowly, smiling at different memories. Then he handed it back to me. Keep it. I frowned. It's yours. No, it's always been yours. I held the notebook tightly. It taught me everything. He nodded. I know. Then he reached beneath his pillow. There was a sealed envelope. Across the front, in his neat handwriting, were 6 simple words. For Emma, open after my funeral. He placed it in my hands. No matter what happens, promise me you'll wait. I promise. He smiled. I trust you. 3 days later, at exactly 4:18 in the morning, my phone rang. Even before answering, I knew hospitals don't call before sunrise with good news. The nurse spoke gently. I'm so sorry. Mr. Harrison passed peacefully about 20 minutes ago. Everything after that became a blur. The drive, the empty roads, the icy wind, the sterile hospital hallway. When I entered the room, he looked peaceful, as if he had simply fallen asleep after a long day. I took his hand. It was already cold. Tears streamed down my face. Not loud, Not dramatic, just quiet grief. The kind that comes when you've lost the person who gave you a second chance at life. "I love you," I whispered. "I hope you knew that." For a long time, I just sat there until a nurse gently touched my shoulder. "We'll take good care of him." I nodded. But inside, I already knew. No one would ever take care of me the way he had. The funeral was held 4 days later. Hundreds of people attended. Business leaders, employees, scholarship recipients, neighbors, former students, people whose lives Uncle Robert had quietly changed. Many of them I'd never met before. Each one carried a story. He paid for my college. He saved my business. He helped my family when no one else would. The line of mourners stretched outside the church. Meanwhile, Father slammed a hand on the table. "This is ridiculous." The attorney didn't even look up. He kept reading. "You abandoned a frightened 13-year-old child. You never apologized. You never asked if she survived." Mother's face turned white. People around the room shifted uncomfortably. The attorney reached the final paragraph. "Therefore, I leave you nothing." Silence, absolute silence. Then, the entirety of my remaining estate, including Harrison Investments, Harrison Properties, all real estate, all business interests, all personal assets, is hereby left to Emma Harrison. For several seconds, no one breathed. Mother blinked. "No," Melissa laughed nervously. That's impossible." Father stood so quickly his chair crashed onto the floor. "There has to be some mistake." The attorney calmly removed another document. "There isn't. This will was updated 18 months ago. It has been reviewed by multiple witnesses and upheld under state law." Mother's voice cracked. "She isn't even his daughter." The attorney finally looked directly at her. "No, she was something much more important. The person he chose." Mother burst into tears. Real tears this time, not the carefully rehearsed kind. She stumbled toward me. "Emma, we made mistakes. I was young. I didn't know." I remained seated. She reached for my hand. I gently pulled it away. Father's anger exploded. "You manipulated him. You turned him against us." I met his eyes calmly. "I didn't have to. You did that yourselves." The attorney raised one final envelope. "There is one last instruction." He looked directly at me. "Mr. Harrison requested that only Emma read this aloud." My hands trembled as I opened the letter. The room became completely silent. I began reading. "My dear Emma, if you're reading this, then I've finally won my longest argument with you." A few soft laughs echoed through the room. Through tears, I smiled. "You always believed I saved your life. The truth is, you saved mine. Money built my businesses. But loving you gave my life meaning." I paused to wipe my eyes, then continued. "Never let this inheritance become your identity. Your character earned this, not your last name. Remember what I taught you. Family is chosen every single day. Love is proven by actions. And wealth is only valuable when it improves someone else's future." The final sentence nearly broke me. The greatest investment I ever made. It was a 13-year-old girl who believed nobody wanted her. She turned out to be priceless. I couldn't continue for several seconds. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even the attorney quietly removed his glasses. Mother collapsed into her chair. Melissa stared at the floor. Father said nothing. For the first time in my life, they had no excuses, no lies, no one left to blame.